Yes, that's how you do APA formatting. And if they do, I do not care. Hi, cold enough for you? Yes, yes it is. You're gonna be so sick of that question. I can't wait for the day that somebody's gonna ask me, hot enough for you? I'm like, no, it could always be hotter. It could be 100 degrees and I'd love it. I like hot weather. I am from Florida. I'm from Central Florida, and I'm from a part of Florida where the ocean at the very closest is only 30 minutes away from me, but that's still far away enough. And actually, the next time I go to Florida, my mom is actually moving to the other side of the state. So I'm going to be on the Atlantic side of the state the next time I visit her. And if I want to visit my hometown, I'm going to have to take a day trip because it's 2.5 hours away. Actually, 1.5 hours if you take like the turnpike and stuff. All right, so how is it going? So a couple of things that I kind of wanted to talk with you about before we get started today. I'm going to go ahead and put this off stop share so you can see my lovely pink mask. So a couple of things that I wanted to share with you today. So I did put an extra credit question on the quiz to kind of check in with you. And I also gave you an out if you didn't have anything to share or anything that you didn't feel like sharing. So most of you shared emojis that I did not even know existed. So thank you for sharing those. I did not know that a hedgehog emoji was actually a thing. So I appreciate that. My favorite is the heart with like the little sparkly golden stars around it. I like that one. But I did get a couple of people noting that they've been a little stressed out for a variety of different reasons, usually because of deadlines or things like that. I just want to remind you that if you are struggling with a deadline, come and talk to me. Generally, I'm willing to work with you to kind of, if we have to move things around a little bit, definitely don't make it a habit. But if you're the kind of person that's putting forth a lot of effort and you need to push back a deadline for some reason or other, come and talk to me about it. I am happy to work with you to kind of get that done. So is anybody here, really quick while I've got you, is anybody here potentially interested in a career in counseling? Okay, so we got an email the other day. So Dr. Teets sent me an email. There is going to be, so we got an email, Stevens College tonight. So it's tonight. So if you can't make it, that's not a big deal. They are doing a virtual open house for counseling at Stevens College. So for those who don't know, Stevens College is about 3 hours northeast in Columbia, Missouri. I lived there for 6 years. It's a wonderful place. Stevens is a women's only college, very much like Cody. I don't know about their master's programs in counseling, but they do have graduate programs in counseling. So if you would like me to, at the end of class, come and talk to me if you'd like to potentially take part in that virtual open house tonight, and I can send you a Zoom link after class. So that's kind of something to think about. We also got a notification from Dr. Green. Please make use of the Writing Center. If you are having issues struggling with writing, and scientific writing in particular can be very, very difficult, feel free to make use of the Writing Center for any reason. So one of the things that we're going to do as we start doing more writing in this class is we are going to do peer review. If there's a day that you're not going to be here and you can't peer review, I'm always going to require you to get it reviewed by the Writing Center. But we have wonderful people who are waiting at the Writing Center. They are very, very happy to help you out. So take advantage of that opportunity if you would like it. All right, so I am going to go back to share now. So I did push your homework assignment to, I'm going to pull up the syllabus really quick now that I think about it. I got to get my flash drive out so I can show you the syllabus. There it is. This is the tiniest thing. I am amazed I don't lose this as often as I do. That is my flash drive. That is how tiny it is. Okay. Let me go ahead and pull that up. So what I'd like to share with you is the syllabus. So you did get the email from me the other day with the video link, and also to kind of push back some deadlines. Oh, come on. Took you long enough. Okay. Let me go ahead and take a look. So we go ahead and pull up the research method syllabus. So we only have to push back a couple of things. Leave me alone. Go away. All right, so obviously I did move the annotated bibliography and the references section. I moved those to Tuesday so we could have some time to talk about APA formatting today, and also any last minute questions that you might have. So just to kind of give you a heads up, by the way, on Monday afternoon, if you have those questions, I will likely not be here. I have a doctor's appointment at 3:30 in Joplin. So as soon as I get done teaching biopsych at 2 o'clock, I'm gone. I will not have time to answer questions, and I obviously can't email you while I drive. So if you need me, email me over the weekend, come and talk with me tomorrow. You can meet with me Tuesday at 1 o'clock if you need to. I would love to do that. So homework 3 has also been moved to Tuesday. Homework 4 was originally due on Tuesday. I'm gonna go ahead and move that to Thursday because it won't take a lot of work. You just have to write a paragraph, and it doesn't even have to be great. It just has to be a paragraph. So the only thing that we're moving is homework number 4. We're gonna move that to Thursday, February 18th, okay? All right, so thankfully, nothing really has to be pushed too far out of the way. So I did finish up a video on different types of claims and different types of validities. If you have not listened to that yet, make sure that you listen to it before you start your homework number 3. We do not have a quiz this week, so you get a nice little break. You can hide out from the ridiculous cold. Professor Helminska told me the other day that if you want to beat the cold, dress up like an onion, lots and lots of layers, like Shrek. Be an onion, be Shrek. But today, I'm going to talk about 2 different things. We're going to talk about how to write an introduction, but folks, it is time. We have to talk about APA formatting. Okay, what are we doing? No. I'm not doing that. Sorry. I don't have time to activate this over the telephone and teach class to you. That just seems a little ridiculous to me. All right, so this is a good time to ask a lot of questions. So here's the deal. Is there anybody here right now that is absolutely excited for the opportunity to learn about APA formatting? I didn't think so. Is there anybody who has learned a little bit about APA formatting before? I know that Dr. Tietz requires it for some of her papers. I know that Dr. Cole requires it with some of her papers. But how many of you feel like you've got a really good grasp on it? Okay, so some of you do. Okay, that's good. Well, is that even in light of the fact that they just changed the edition last year and they kind of made it a little different? You still feel pretty good? Oh, well, excellent then. That's wonderful. So here's the deal. This will not be your favorite lecture, and here's why. APA rules are really arbitrary. They change all the time, and sometimes for good reason, and sometimes for not very good reasons. So some of these changes, so I first learned APA formatting with the 5th edition. And when you're used to a certain edition, when you learn to do things a certain way, one of the things that you'll find is it's going to change. And your first instinct is, why did they have to change it? I don't like it. So there are some things that I look at when I look at APA formatting and I'm like, why did they change it? I don't like it. Usually that's going to come into play when we talk about author names and how many you have to list. Now, on the other hand, some changes can be great. APA formatting now permits use of the singular they, which is awesome. You can use the singular they as a pronoun now. That I do not mind. But we got to talk about a couple of different things. So here's the deal. These rules are arbitrary. They don't make a lot of sense. And here's the hard part. You are not going to get these absolutely perfectly, but you still got to do them. And the more that you do them, the better you will get. And I will do my best to try to make this fun for you. I promise it's not going to be fun, but I'm going to try. And part of the way I'm going to try to make this fun for you is I'm going to point out a lot of mistakes that I've made in my own papers, because I still make them. So you have guidelines for how to format manuscripts. This publication manual is honestly, even after you leave Kadi, and especially if you know that you're going to be doing some writing, you should have a copy of this. If you are ever going to be writing papers in your graduate program, if you think you are ever going to be publishing anything, you need a copy of this. So the APA, the American Psychological Association, has guidelines for how to format your manuscript, cite and refer to your sources, and there are also guidelines for appropriate language. So if you go into the table of contents here, there are things like scholarly writing and publishing principles. So they talk about publishing ethics, legal guidelines, protecting intellectual property, which I am always interested in the concept of intellectual property, paper elements and format, journal article reporting standards, style, tables and figures, references, and the publication process, and bias-free language. So these can actually help you out with different parts of your paper. Now, I will tell you, don't try to read this like a book. It's it's very kind of dry. Okay, everybody good? All right. So we're going to start with some really simple stuff. We're going to talk about how to format your manuscript. So we're going to start by talking about the fact that there is a difference now between a student paper and a professional paper. So as of the 7th edition, if you are writing a paper for this class, there are slightly different guidelines than for a professional paper. So first of all, your margins need to be 1 inch all around. That is true whether we are talking about a professional paper or a student paper. 1 inch margins. And folks, I was a teaching assistant for research methods for many semesters in graduate school before I taught research methods here. I have looked at a lot of student papers. I know what a 1 inch margin looks like. And I also know when somebody has made their margins 1.5 inches so that they can put less words on the paper and look like they wrote more. Not that I think that you would do that, but I've seen like every little formatting trick, but I know the difference between a 1 inch margin and a 1.5 inch margin. So really quick, let's talk about how you set this up if you are doing something like Microsoft Word. And it's probably going to ask me to activate again, and I'm not going to. So, yep, how did I know? I would say I'm psychic, but I think I'm not. I'm just noticing patterns. So here we're going to go to page layout. And so what we do is we go to our margins. So here we have normal. And one of the things that's actually kind of nice about this is that the normal margins are 1 inch all around. And that's typically what the default is going to be. Don't go to the Office 2003 default where it's 1 on top and 1 on bottom and then 1.25 in on the sides. So here you can actually kind of see a difference here. I'm going to go ahead and just type stuff. And I'm just going to let it run. Okay, so maybe we'll get a couple of lines here. So this is what those 1 inch margins look like. You can see that they're about the same size. Here's what happens if we kind of do, like, for example, a wide margin. Look at how much larger those margins are. Or for example, if we do a 2003 default. This one's a little bit more subtle, but you can actually see that the margins on the left and the right are actually going to be wider than the margins on the top and the bottom. So this is how you would do that in Microsoft Word. So all you do is you go into margins and you basically select 1 inch margins all around. Obviously, I'm not going to save this. This is the worst paper I ever wrote because it didn't even say any words. Now, how many of you use Google Docs? Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at how you would do that in Google Docs, just to make sure. I am not a Google Docs believer, but sometimes we got stuff. Okay. Oh my, that's everybody. Okay. Oh, wait, that's me. Well, now I'm signed in. Oh, I'm not, oh, fine. I will type in my password. Okay. Wait, what's my password? We're going to go to LastPass. All right. Yeah, we're going to sign in. Thank you for your patience. Send an SMS passcode. There we go. Authenticate. Hurry up. Okay. And the last one that I used was probably Google. There we go. We want to go to, there we go. Okay. All right. H. Okay, so we're going to start with a blank document here. So if we want to kind of mess around with our margins, what we're going to do is we're going to go into Format. Ooh, check this out, folks. You can use the new Citations tool. And check it out. You can actually pick APA citation options if you wish. Now, I don't know how to use this because I'm like, I like Microsoft Word because I'm kind of, well, I like to stick to things that I know work. But I may kind of mess around with this so that if you are using Google Docs, you can actually learn how to do citations using APA formatting using the software. But we'll look at that another time. Let's go ahead and look at our formatting. Paragraph styles, line spacing, columns, bullets and numbers, heading and footing. Where can I do margins? All right. Oh, okay. Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, that's absolutely what you do. So it already has 1 inch margins set around. So if you want to make them bigger, you modify them that way. So you can show the ruler, you can basically drag to get to your formatting until it perfectly matches 1. So it already kind of has those 1 inch margins. Thank you, Julia. All right, so that's how you would do it there. You're just gonna do a click and drag, and you can do it that way. And you can also do this as well. And I think it's already doing 1 inch margins from the top, so you ought to be okay. All right, so we want 1 inch margins all around. Now, some of these things I am going to mention because I wrote this before I had a better grip on the new edition. I'm going to add some things to it. So we want 1 inch margins, which I already showed you. Line spacing, double space, no excuses. Double space for everything. And as I kind of told you in the formatting video that I made about references and how to kind of set that up, sometimes, I don't think Word does this anymore, but sometimes what Microsoft Word likes to do is to add a little extra space after a paragraph. So if you're in Microsoft Word, make sure that doesn't happen. Okay. So your document should look something like this. And notice that even when I start a new paragraph, we are still dealing with a single double space. Okay, paragraph alignment. It should be left justified except for certain headings, which we will talk about in a minute. Okay. Okay, so next we have to talk about the font. Now, up until very recently, there were only two types of font that were permissible. The first was 12-point Times New Roman, or Courier, which basically looks like a typewriter. Do you know why we picked Courier font? Because back then, some people still had typewriters. Hey, don't laugh. Dr. Gilchrist wrote all of her high school term papers on a typewriter because she could not afford a computer. Okay, so one thing that has changed with the 7th edition is the fonts that are permissible. So 12-point Times New Roman is fine, but I'm going to show you a couple of other fonts that are permissible as well. So I'm going to open up Word and it's going to ask me to activate it again. Okay, so write these down. So if you don't like Times New Roman, and some people don't because it's the default, 11-point Calibri, which is this font, it is a sans serif font. Calibri 11-point is okay. So this is Calibri 11-point font. That is permissible. And I'll go ahead and zoom in on this so you can see all of the differences. So you actually have some options here. Okay, we're going to go to page width so you can see it. There we go. So we have Calibri 11-point. You also have Arial 11-point. Or you can do this one. You can do a 10-point Lucida Sans Unicode 10-point. So these are the sans serif fonts. And then notice that they're all slightly different in size. Folks, one thing that I am going to remind you in this class, I have some expectations for how long things should be. So when you're writing an intro, it probably shouldn't be a page. Your method section might be a page, but I don't have hard, fast page limits. So if you want to use a bigger font like Lucida Sans Unicode or Arial, that is okay. I don't think you're trying to weasel out of writing more pages because I don't have a hard and fast page limit. Now, I don't like any of those. So what are my options for fonts that have serif fonts? So we do have our good old 12-point Times New Roman. I personally like this one. You'll actually notice I use this a lot on my syllabi. I'm a big fan of Georgia 11-point. Or you can do Computer Modern. Is that what it's called? All right. Oh, no. Okay, so computer modern does not exist. So we can't really do that here, but Times New Roman 12 is also permissible, of course. Now check it out. These really aren't all that different from each other, are they? But don't you at least like that you get to have a choice? Who likes Calibri? Yeah, I don't like Calibri. Arial? Arial's all right. Lucida Sans Unicode? Georgia, that is my favorite. Times New Roman, you have options. You can pick any one of these. I know, great, right? But don't you at least like knowing that you have a choice? You didn't used to. Okay, so in your publication manual, they do recommend Calibri, Arial, Lucida Sans Unicode, Times New Roman, Georgia, or a computer modern, even though we don't have that here. We recommend these fonts because they are legible. So y'all, don't write your paper in wingdings. I'm not going to understand what you say if you write that. So we pick that because it is legible. So here's kind of some examples. So if we try some of these other fonts, for example, if we try curls, wait, let's try this. This is, oh, I'm still in wingdings. All right, let's try a kind of a fun font. But here's kind of my point, Edwardian script. I can't read that. Like, I can't read that. It's going to be very difficult to read. So we pick these because they are legible. And additionally, they're widely available. And here's what's also really critical. Sometimes when you are reporting statistics, you have to report Greek letters. All of these fonts here have special characters that include Greek letters. Some of these other ones do not. So this is why we pick these. We want to make sure that Dr. Gilchrist can actually read it. And y'all, her eyes aren't getting much better. All right. So you get choices for fonts. Ooh, fun. I know it's not that fun. I know. Okay. So here are a couple of other formatting do's. So first of all, your first line of every paragraph should be indented at 1/2 an inch. Your exceptions to this are your abstract, where there is no indentation, and your references section, which uses a hanging indentation, where the first line hangs over. So we're always going to indent the first line of a paragraph at 1/2 an inch. And you can set your tab to that as well. Yeah, and it does say for consistency, use the tab key or the automatic paragraph formatting function of your word processing program. Did y'all see the video about the guy on Zoom who got stuck in the cat filter? And he's like, I'm a cat. I'm not a cat, I'm a lawyer. I thought that was kind of funny. I love the filters function. I give myself like goofy mustaches. It's great. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the difference between a student paper versus a professional paper. So this is going to be a little bit new. So let's go ahead and take a look. And any time that you have questions on APA formatting, you can actually, Google is really good, but in general, you can actually find most of it on the style blog of the APA. So we're going to look at a couple of differences. So here, we are going to do student versus professional papers. Oh, this isn't what I wanted. I wanted APA style blog. Oh, here we go. Here we go. So if you go to apastyle.apa.org, so you can actually find some sample papers. So this is new information, by the way. So we started doing this with this edition. So it's only been around since about 2019. So here, let me see if we can pull a handout. May I have a handout, please? Student paper checklist. What's that? Let's see. So we can look at a student paper checklist, and I will download this and actually make it available for you if you would like it. So you can kind of see here that there is a checklist. Oh, I am definitely going to do this. This is great. So we have a format, we have a title, an author name, an author affiliation, a course number and a course name, an instructor name, and a due date. We have formatting and things like that. But let's kind of talk about these differences really quick. So let me see. So here we have a student sample paper, and then I'm going to pull up a professional sample paper. So I'm going to start with the professional paper because this is what we were doing up until very, very recently. So on the very first title page, here's what a professional paper looks like. And you do not need to write this down because you will not be writing a professional style paper here. So what we would do for a professional title page, we usually have our title, we have our authors, we have their affiliations. So this person is from the Center for University Teaching, Learning, and Assessment from the University of West Florida. Here we have somebody from the Department of Psychology from the University of West Florida. That's in Pensacola, by the way. And then author notes. So information about corresponding author and things like that. But here's what's really critical. So notice that there's nothing here about due date or class or anything like that. And we also have a shorter version. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. We have a shorter version of the title in all caps at the very top of the paper. This is what is called a running head. And what you're going to notice is that in a professional paper, on every single page, you're going to have that running head. So this is what the professional paper does. Let's take a look. There we go. The student paper is going to look a little bit different. I'm going to move this back up. There we go. So notice that there's no running head here. So notice that at the very top corner of our student paper, we have no running head. So here's one of the things that was always really, really difficult about formatting papers. So back in the 5th edition, when I learned how to do this, the running head was on the first page, but then you didn't use it on the abstract. And then once you actually got into the body of the paper, then you had to put the running head back. That's a headache. So you had to have different sections, some of which had a header, some of which did not have a header, and it's a pain. But notice here that in the student paper, no running head. You do not have to worry about a running head at all. But notice what we do have. So we have the person who wrote the paper, what department, and the university or the college. So we would have something like Department of Psychology, Cotty College. You have the name of the course instructor, and then the due date of the paper. So I'm going to download that checklist, and I'm going to make that available on e-learning because I think that will be really useful. Because the more of these resources that you have on hand, the better off you're going to be. And the easier time you will have understanding these and putting these skills into practice. So I'll make sure to make this available for you as well, so you can kind of see some of what you need to be able to do. Because these, and here's the other thing, by the way, so I will kind of tell you this. If you look at the rubrics for the different sections, style and formatting is about 30% of each paper's grade. I put a bigger emphasis on content and organization than I do on style and formatting. So what this means is that, yes, I care, but if I see like one little APA mistake, you're not going to fail. If I notice a lot of the same types of APA mistakes, especially after I've given you feedback, that's another matter. Okay, so now we have to talk about headings. So, yeah, I told you this was not going to be your favorite. The rules are goofy, but you still got to do them. So we have to use headings to divide our manuscript into sections. Okay. So let's go ahead and take a look at that style blog again, and we'll talk about these different types of headers. All right. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. Okay. So we're going to look up headings, student paper. All right, so we're going to go to our headings. So this has been modified. So headings identify the sections within a paper. Make your headings descriptive and concise. Headings that are well formatted and clearly worded aid both visual and non-visual readers. So we have 5 different levels of headings. Folks, in this class, you're probably at most only going to use 3. You probably will not need to use all 5. You will, most of you will definitely be using a level 1 header. You will be using a level 2 header, and maybe some of you, depending on how you construct your paper, will be using a level 3 header, but most of you are going to be using levels 1 and 2 mostly. So here are kind of the formats of our headings. So a level 1 header is going to be centered, it is going to be bolded, and we are going to title the case heading. So here's what that is going to mean. If you title your paper, if the introduction of your paper is titled Introduction, that's going to have a level 1 heading. Now, a level 2 heading is basically flush to the left. So we're going to move it to the left. Again, it is going to be bolded and titled with the case heading. Level 3, this is the most that you would need for this class. You're going to do flush left. It's going to be bolded and italic, and you are still going to capitalize major points. And again, what you're going to notice is that the text will begin immediately one double space below as a new paragraph. Now, I will show you level 4 and level 5, but you probably will not need them. Level 4, we're going to indent it. So we go in 0.5, we're going to bold it. We're going to title the case heading and end with a period, and we start the text immediately on that same line. And I'll send you a handout on the headings too. Like the more handouts we have, the better off we'll be, because how many of you actually have a copy of this? We do have one in the library, and I'm always happy to loan you mine, but that's not enough to go around. So if we have free handouts available, I'm going to use them. And then finally, we have a level 5. Again, I don't think you're going to need this, but the same idea. It's going to be indented. We're going to italicize it and bold it. Again, capitalizing important nouns and verbs, and then ending with a period, keeping the text on the same line. So here's kind of what this would look like. Because the first paragraphs of a paper are understood to be introductory, the heading introduction is not needed. Do not begin a paper with an introduction heading. The paper title at the top of the first page of text acts as a de facto level 1 heading. So let me kind of see if I can show you a paper. If I have a paper here. I don't believe I do. I think I have examples on the next page, maybe. I don't. Okay. Let me go ahead and find Let me find one of my papers so you can kind of see the different levels in action. Okay. Oh, that's not what I wanted. That's APA blog. I just want, oh, here's a PDF. I'm fine with that. Okay. Oh, I don't want that. Oh, it already downloaded. Cool. Okay. So here is kind of an example. So you can kind of see here, there is not a heading here, but as we kind of scroll down, let me take a look. So notice that the APA formatting for this is a little off. So let's find another. I promise I have papers that actually exist. Let's see. I know, scholar.google.com. I want me. Oh, I didn't want that. I just want my paper. I didn't want my Google account. I just wanted my Google Scholar account. Okay. Oh, it's right here, my profile. Okay. All right, so let me go ahead and see if I can find, that's HTML. It's HTML. HTML, can I have something that's a PDF? There we go. Okay, thank goodness. All right. So let's see if that downloaded. Did it? Okay. Hopefully this is, okay, so this is an older paper. So what you're gonna notice is that obviously if you are using this on Microsoft Word, it's gonna look a little different. This would be an example of a level 2 heading. So here, we do not use the word introduction, but here's our level 2 heading. So we started with this introduction, we basically break it up. So that would be a level 2 heading. So notice experiment 1 is a level 1 heading. It is centered and it is bolded. So we said this is our first experiment. Then we have a level 2 heading. This is a level 3 heading. Now, obviously the headings have changed, but this would be considered a level 3 heading at this point. So I'll kind of give you some more examples of those. You should not need more than a level 3 heading for this. Thanks for hanging in there. I know this is not the most fascinating one. So the abstract will come immediately after your title page. It is about 150 to 250 words. It's a general summary of your study, what you did, what you found, and what it means. You need to include 3 to 5 keywords at the bottom of the abstract so that if we put this in a database, those are the keywords that you could use to help search. So you need to include some keywords at the end of that abstract, and you will not need to write an abstract until the end of the year. So you won't have to worry about this until December. And then finally, don't indent, just use block text. And now, as a good example of something you should not do, you can look at Dr. Gilchrist's abstract and see if you notice a mistake. There's a very obvious mistake in my paper. Can you find it? I indented. Bad, Dr. Gilchrist, bad. But do notice that I picked about 3 to 5 keywords at the very bottom so that when these can be put into a database. So if you search for the phrase visual working memory, this paper will pop up. So that's why you include keywords. All right. So I don't have a lot of time to go over grammar, but I will kind of talk a little bit. The section on bias-free language within the publication manual is pretty large, but I think it's kind of important. So we're going to start by talking about some general writing guidelines for grammar. First of all, don't write sentence fragments. So an example of a sentence fragment would be if you started a sentence with, Trying to think of a good sentence fragment. Can anybody give me a good sentence fragment? Actually, I bet this has an example. Maybe. Let's see. No, this is all punctuation and abbreviations. So you don't want to start a sentence with, for example, and, or because, or things like that. Actually, or things like that. So if that was just my sentence, or things like that, that would be a sentence fragment. So we want a full sentence with a subject, a verb, and an object. We do not want that to be fragmented. Now, I know that when you go to Renee Hampton and she helps you make your resume, she tells you to use fragments. You should use fragments in your resume. Do not use sentence fragments in your paper. So for example, here's the sentence fragment, assisted with experiment. Well, great, that's wonderful for a resume. It's not good for a research paper. When you are writing sentences, use parallel construction. So for example, I like shopping, cooking, and to play with my cat. This is a bad deal, and here's why. So I've got a verb that ends with ing, and then I have an infinitive, to play. That is not very good sentence construction. What is better is I like shopping, cooking, and playing with my cat. We want all of those to match up. Okay. We want subject-verb agreement. So when I notice grammar mistakes in papers, they're not often, but I usually will see issues with either sentence fragments or noun-pronoun agreement. So what this means is if I have a singular noun, that needs to be followed with a singular pronoun. That can include the singular they, but it can't necessarily, but on the other hand, if I have a multiple group of people, so if I say this group went to see if she, or the group, we want to make sure that our nouns and pronouns agree, singular they is permissible. Watch out for homonyms. Watch out for homonyms. So as an instructor who's graded a lot of papers, oh gosh, don't worry, I have sparkling water too. I've had a lot of meetings today about assessment. So we want to kind of avoid something like this. There, and there. Make sure you're using the right one. And these ones can be really tricky because spell check, these are all words. Spell check's not going to nab them and let you know that it's incorrect. And by the way, this is a formal paper. This is a formal paper, so don't use contractions. So really, the biggest mistake you're going to make is between T-H-E-R-E and T-H-E-I-R. So watch out for your homonyms. Make sure that you are using apostrophes appropriately. So it apostrophe S versus it's with no apostrophe. So make sure you know the difference. Okay, so we have to talk about punctuation. Okay, so the goal of a comma is to connect independent clauses. So for example, before we ran the experiment, we presented participants with an informed consent sheet. So the independent clauses here are, we ran the experiment, and then we gave the participants an informed consent sheet. So a comma can help with that. We can also use a comma to separate introductory phrases before independent clauses. So for example, instead of dividing participants into groups, comma, we tested participants one at a time. If you have a series of 3 or more items, use a comma to separate them. General rules for commas, no comma splices. So something like this, Squiggly ran to the forest, comma, Aardvark chased the peeves. That's a comma splice, and you could probably put an and or a but or something like that instead. Additionally, don't put unnecessary commas in if you don't have to. Okay. And believe me, I'm very, I'm not nitpicky with y'all's grammar, but I notice grammatical and punctuation mistakes. So I'll point them out, but I won't be harsh with you. I won't be like, how could you do that? I'll be like, sometimes it's hard to proofread. It happens. Okay. My favorite, a semicolon. So a semicolon can basically be used in place of a comma. So for example, basically being used to connect 2 independent clauses. All participants received a health screening, semicolon, however, comma, 2 participants reported heart problems. Now, if you don't have the however, the semicolon can also take the place of an and or an or, basically. So it's there to connect 2 independent clauses. If you're like me and you love semicolons, you probably might use them in your paper too much. So make sure you have a little bit of sentence variety. I often love to use semicolons far, far more than I should. Okay. Now, colons are typically used to start a list or a series. So the items that we used for this experiment included the following, colon, and then have the list. You can also use this instead of a semicolon when the second sentence explains the first. For example, my lawyer's like a shark, colon, he has serious teeth. Okay, I thought it was funny. Yes, thank you. Okay, anybody need some more time here? Okay, so I will talk a little bit more about bias-free language in a minute, but here are some general writing style guidelines. And these are things that I could always, that I still need to occasionally listen to. Be concise. If you can say it in fewer words, do that. I am not a concise writer. Dr. Gilchrist, just to remind you, in one of her very first papers, was able to take 9 or 10 pages out of an introduction and still have a workable introduction. I say too much. If you can be concise and say it quickly, that is preferred. Use active voice when possible rather than passive voice. So for example, we have the girl hit the boys. So that's active voice. The boys were hit by the girl is passive voice. We want to try, when possible, to use active voice. So, in general, try to avoid sexist language. So one of the things that's great about a singular they is that you don't necessarily have to refer to a gender in that pronoun. Now, when I was coming up and learning how to write, one of the things that I was taught is that if you didn't know the gender of the person, you assumed it was a he. So you would say, if a person found this, then he. We don't do that anymore. You can go ahead and use one. So if a person found this, then one would, or you can use singular they. So there's a lot of discussion in here about bias-free language. So there are sections related to age. There are sections to avoiding bias-free language with respect to disability. And in particular, that one can be, that is one where you'll definitely want to talk to other people, because some people prefer person first language. So for example, they might choose to say something like a person with autism. Other people prefer identity first language. And so rather than a person with autism, they would say they're an autistic person. Everybody's going to be different about what they prefer. And so in that case, you have to be very, very careful. Now, obviously, there are some definite terms that you should not use when we're talking about age or ability. So for example, when we're talking about age, we're talking about older adults. Don't use terms like seniors, elderly, the aged. That kind of others them. And it also kind of connotates that these people are a separate group from society. So we use terms like, I've always referred to them as older adults, and that's totally fine. Now, in gerontology, sometimes you get terms like young old, and oldest old, and that's going to be kind of dependent on your field. But in general, we want to avoid othering language. So when we're talking about age, that means we don't call them the elderly. We call them older adults. When we're talking about disabilities, we don't talk about referring to people as either being high functioning or low functioning. When we are talking about gender, we use appropriate terminology. We do not necessarily assume a binary. When we are talking about race or ethnic identity, we capitalize proper terms. So capitalize the B in black, capitalize the W in white, and make sure that you're using parallel construction. So don't say African Americans and whites. You say things like Black Americans and white Americans, or African Americans and European Americans. So make sure that you have that parallelism in your structure. So there's a lot in here. There are several pages about how to get better with the bias that is in your language. And so if you have an opportunity to take a look at this, or if you want to borrow mine, these things change very, very quickly sometimes. And so it's very useful to have guidelines for how to refer to this in your writing. When we're talking about numbers, if you have a number that is 10 or higher, use numerals. Don't write out the number. So you don't have to write out TEN. So if it's 10 and higher, use a digit. If it's less than 10, write it out using letters. So if you have 8, you spell it EIGHT. I almost forgot how to spell 8, y'all. That was bad. Now there is an exception. If your sentence begins with a number, you write it out. So if I say 39 participants chose to take part in this experiment, write out the 39. While and since, so when I say they were doing this while another group was doing that, or since, only use these to refer to time. Hey folks, just to remember, males and females are adjectives, not nouns. unless we are talking about a broad group of people. They are adjectives, not nouns. And this is just Dr. Gilchrist's reminder, don't use the word prove, ever, never, ever. You can see how much I care because I hit 10 for no reason. Okay, so now let's talk about the tricky part. Let's talk about citing, and I'm introducing this to you now so that when it comes time for you to cite later on, as we get into late February, early March, you're not freaking out and you have what you need. So I changed a couple of things compared to the slides that you have. I got some new authors for you. Some of you are famous. So I have a couple of authors. So the general author date referencing works like this. So we have our first author, second author, and so on. Now here's something really important. Don't mess with the author order. You've heard me say it once. I will say it again. Don't try to put them in alphabetical order. You put them in the order that they're listed in. So why am I telling you not to mess with author order? Author order tells you how much of an intellectual contribution each person made. So the first author is often the person that made the greatest contribution. The second person is the second most. Now it does get kind of weird though, and here's why. There are some laboratories where the last author is the second most important person because that's the person's lab. You're gonna find that more in neuroscience convention, like by convention, that's more common in like neuroscience and biology. In psychology though, the first author is the one who made the greatest contribution. My doctoral dissertation starts with my name because it's my dissertation, it was my idea, and I gave the greatest intellectual contribution. So don't mess around with the author order. You do not get to decide who made the greatest intellectual contribution. The authors did. So the general format of a citation is going to look like this. So I'm going to show you a couple of different examples of what this looks like using papers that I have written. So the change detection paradigm originally developed by Phillips. So notice that I'm actually referring to the a paper in text. So the citation is explicitly referred to in text. And so what I do is if I refer to it in text, in parentheses, we then include the year. So this is an example of an in text or an in narrative citation. We can also choose to do a parenthetical citation. And generally, I would say when possible, pick parenthetical citation over in narrative. You want parenthetical citation because you can kind of see how this kind of cuts up the narrative a little bit. So the change detection paradigm, originally developed by Phillips and more recently popularized by Luckenvogel, you can just see how those citations kind of cut into what I'm trying to say, and it's kind of hard to keep track. But when they're parenthetical, it works like this. By using this simple task across various experimental manipulations, the field has learned a great deal about the nature of storage and maintenance within visual working memory and is addressing many fundamental issues. And then notice I've got this long list in parentheses that you can skip ahead to the next sentence. So in general, pick parenthetical when you can. So we got to talk about a very famous rule called the et al. Rule. If you have 3 or more authors and you've already, so here's the thing. So the first time that you cite it, you have to cite all of the authors every time. So the first time you cite it, you have to cite all of the authors as I did here. So De Soto, Ogden, Garcia, Jean-Just, and Sakaria. Or Jean-Just. Did I pronounce it correctly? Jean-Just? Okay, I told you I don't speak French very well. Okay, but after I've cited it that first time, at that point, I can invoke the et al. Rule. Et al. Is Latin for and others, and others. So if you have more than 3 authors and it's the second or third or fourth or fifth time that you're citing that paper. So as long as it's not the first citation, you can do something like this, DeSoto et al. 2020. So that's kind of nice, isn't it? You don't have to constantly be citing all those authors again and again. Now I'm going to share something really embarrassing with you so you can learn from my mistakes. My honors thesis, which I wrote in my senior year of college, guess who didn't know the et al. Rule? And some of these papers that I was citing had like at least 12 authors. So every time that I wrote that paper, like every time I saw that citation, you get the long list of names. Use the et al. Rule. Now here's the catch. If you have a single author or if you have two authors, the et al. Rule does not apply. It only works if you have 3 or more authors. So the first time you have to cite all authors if it's 3 or more. After that, you can use et al. I am often an et al, and it is very nice. It's kind of like Gilligan's Island, where they're like the movie star and the rest. Like, that's what it's like. It's and the rest. Okay. So here's another rule that I did not learn until very recently, which is, again, kind of embarrassing, but I hope you learn from my mistakes. So if you mention the same citation more than once in a paragraph, you use the standard author year format for your first citation, but then after that, you can omit the year as long as you are still within the same paragraph. You cannot do this with parenthetical citations. This will only work for in-narrative citations. Additionally, once you move to a new paragraph, guess what? You got to go back to author year format. So I'm going to pull up Annotate so you can see this a little bit better. Ooh, oh, there we go. Okay, so here we have Sternberg, 1966. I've got my author. Oop. Where did it go? Wait, I've got my author and then I've got my year. Now notice later on, I mentioned this, I refer to the article again in the same paragraph. So I say Sternberg reported that as the length of the list items increased, there was a linear increase in RT. Notice I don't have to cite the year here. Now, if I had started a brand new paragraph, would I have had to put the year? Yes. If you start a new paragraph, you go back to this. If you're within the same paragraph, though, and you're citing from the same source more than once, you do not have to have the year, but this only works in narrative. Do not do this if you are doing parenthetical citation, which is what I would prefer you to do. See, I told you all these rules are all over the place and they change all the time. Okay, everybody good? Okay. So here's something else you need to know with parenthetical citations. If you have more than one, this is another one I'm ashamed to admit I only learned within the past 5 years. If you have more than one citation within the same parentheses, they need to be in alphabetical order by first author. So going back to that parenthetical citation that I showed you before, look at this. So notice that all of my citations, and I'm going to go ahead and put this on Annotate, and I'm going to put, I would like a highlighter, but apparently you do not have that. Maybe, I will pick you, okay. So notice this. So notice that the very first citation I have here, I start alphabetical by first author. So the first author here is Allen. This citation, the first author is Anderson. So we're moving in alphabetical order by first author. Then we have Cowan, Gorgoraptis, Thiel, and Zhang. So we don't mess around with the author order for each paper, but for each paper that we include in our parenthetical citation, we're going to put that in order by first author. So the first author with the, so we have A-L, A-N, C, G, T, and Z. Does that make sense? Yeah. I was like, I would love to tell you I was today years old when I learned this, but I learned it 5 years ago, and I was even embarrassed that it took me that long to learn it. Like I told you, you get to learn from all of my mistakes. Okay. So let's talk about the references section, and hopefully that video that I made for you also helped a little bit. So the references section always goes at the very end of your paper. So here's how we kind of set that up. It needs to be on a separate page from the rest of the paper. It needs to be its own page, so use a page break to get there. Again, as a reminder, this is not a works consulted. Only include articles that you cite, and if you cite it, it needs to be there. Include a centered section header at the top of your page. And really quick too, what I want to check on is to make sure, let me see. Also, one thing I don't mention here, the word references needs to be centered and it needs to be bolded. Bold it. That's another one that Dr. Gilchrist didn't always learn. The copy editors usually take care of that, but it's embarrassing to know I've made mistakes. But that's why you have editors and copy editors. They can help you with this stuff. Now, the general format for a references section, and I kind of went over this, but I'm always happy to go over it again. Yes. So a citation is actually within the body of the paper, and we'll kind of talk about this more when we get into research ethics. You need to cite any idea that did not come from you. So when you're pulling in ideas from the papers that you find and you put them within the context of the paper, if it's not your idea, you need to cite it.
What I'm trying to say is sometimes instead of writing reference, it's the word cited.
Uh-huh. It is the same as a works cited, but works cited is an MLA convention. We're APA and we call them references. But no, that's exactly what it is. I'm sorry, like the way you phrased that, I was like, I thought you were like, why do we cite? And I'm like, oh, that is a big conversation for another time. But yeah, it's basically the same as a works cited page, but works cited is an MLA convention. APA uses the term references. So the general format works like this. We have all of our authors, and the authors usually go last name, first initial, second initial if it's included. Then we have our year. By the way, notice every period. Those periods are intentional. So we have the year, we have the journal article, we have the journal article title, we have the title of the journal itself in italics, comma, volume number in italics, issue number in parentheses and not in italics, comma, page numbers, period. That is the exact format that we are going to be using. Now to get into, well, we do not have time. We will get into the intricacies of these on Tuesday. If you need help with your references and your annotated bibliography before then, come and talk to me. If you need more time, come and talk to me. If you would like to attend the Stephens College open house tonight, come and talk to me for a Zoom link. All right, everybody have a great day. Stay warm out there. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you next time. Have a great weekend.